Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the WHOLESTIC Method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie, and have you used a CGM before? CGM is continuous glucose monitor, and there's different options out there. Ideally, you can get it from your doctor, but they seem to just want to wait until you're type 2 diabetic and not be preventative. I would like us to take ownership of our health and make choices now to prevent having high, low glucose readings and optimize your health from the inside out by testing and not guessing. And that includes a CGM that goes on for 14 days, and you can order one via NutriSense. And a CGM is giving you glucose updates with a small device in the back of your arm 24/7. Totally easy. I actually did a video on my YouTube channel, Low Carb Athlete, how to apply this CGM. First time, you're kind of scared, but it doesn't hurt. But it gives you real-time glucose readings. Glucose response to meals. You'll learn about what foods are reactive to you, and that could be a healthy food that you think is great, but it could raise your glucose. Simple things as stevia, for me, raise my glucose. Chewing gum, raise my glucose. Stress, when I'm driving a car and there's traffic, raises my glucose. Every stress response is a glucose response. So learn how to manage your stress. Learn how to pick right foods for you, unless you can, do other lab testing and figure out vibrant wellness food zoomers, but it's kind of expensive for people. So if you can wear a CGM, it's a great way to learn about stress, food, exercise, stacking movement with your nutrition. Figure out how to balance your blood sugar. So we want to learn more about how to exercise and eat or not eat. And morning cortisol, does it raise your glucose? If there's hidden stressors at nighttime, does your glucose go up higher while you're sleeping? So it gives us lots of clues that we can put in our investigation when we are working on your personalized fueling, training, and performance program to improve fat loss, performance, and longevity. So head to NutriSense website, nutrisense.io, how it works. You can learn more about your habits, your routines, your relationship to food, a little bit more. Great app to use, and it can sync on to different programs, so you can put it all together. So if you want to get started with your journey in NutriSense, I suggest this to all my clients. Use at least 30 days. So you can do a 30-day, 90-day, different programs, but you can pick which one you want. You get the sensor in the mail, put it on, lasts for 14 days, sync it to the app, and get your readings on there. And then if you're doing my VIP coaching program, I'm working with you to correlate this data together. So begin your health optimization journey with NutriSense, and you can save on your order with our code, as usual, Low Carb Athlete. So no carbs is not our goal, it's carb timing, and using NutriSense, you can help figure out your nutrient-dense whole food plan and when to adjust your macros based on your exercise intensity, duration, based on your life stressors, and learn more. So it's nice to have this data. So test and not guess with NutriSense. Let me know how you like it. Hello, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm back sharing more information on why you should test and not guess for your fitness training, your fueling plan, your gut repair protocol, your food sensitivities. So much of this stuff, it's such valuable information you can collect to create a personalized coaching program as an athlete of all levels, someone that is into increasing their performance in daily life, in sports, as well as improving the aging processes. I talk about this on every show that I'm striving to thrive as I age and get stronger, get faster, get more power out of my legs and my body, and not blame the aging process, but change how we train as we get older. After age 40, you might have to look at things a little differently. You might need to fuel differently, and your fasting variation needs to change and adjust based on your activity level, based on your stress level. And I'm finding more and more clients that are coming to me for help getting a personalized fueling, training, performance program is that they're doing too much fasting, too little calorie intake. So we're getting that LEA, low energy availability. We are not prioritizing sleep and focusing on how we start the day, how we end the day, and really getting our nutrition timing right. So post-workout, what we should eat and timing of that for females versus males, and really looking at our nutrition to match our exercise. So if you are doing truly high heart rate workouts, you may be interested in adding more nature's carbs post-workout. If you're doing another hard workout coming up in a day or so, and replace that muscle glycogen fuel you depleted. We've gotten so one end of the spectrum or another by just focusing on only eating fat, and all carbs are bad. And then we focus on getting protein in and focusing on improving our muscle strength gains. But what if you are doing a more glycolytic type of workout? Should you fuel differently? And how do you time that? And women versus men, should we eat something before we work out or not? Depends on your gender, what you did the day before, how your sleep was, how your stress is. And if you ate dinner the night before and you're working out first thing in the morning, maybe you don't need to eat anything. But I'm putting some stuff in my coffee as some heavy cream and some creatine, and seeing how that works. So it's such an N=1 experiment. But what I'm working with clients, if they're in person, doing metabolic testing. And I think it's a really great addition to creating that personalized training program, doing a resting metabolism test and an active recovery test. And ideally, combine this test with functional lab testing, as I suggest to clients do a comprehensive blood chemistry panel. Your doctor hopefully would cover it by insurance, but most barely cover half of what we would like to see on there. So you can always go to Ulta Labs and get 20% off and order your own labs for nothing, and just $20 for insulin, or $200-$300 you can get a full panel, and then we can go through it in functional optimal ranges rather than normal ranges. And then a gut test, checking on what's going on under the hood, because if you don't know, you don't know what you don't know, and you're just guessing. So doing a GI map or Genova diagnostics test is another good one. A 3-day stool sample for Genova, GI map's 1-day sample, a Dutch test for dried urine for a hormone panel, or a saliva test for cortisol. Some people like better. And then if we identify and we've got some food sensitivities, we want to identify doing Vibrant Wellness Food Zoomer panel, and for sure the Wheat Zoomer, to find out what's going on with that. So 3 labs is great. 3 to 5 labs, depending on your budget and your goals and what areas of opportunity we reveal in our nutritional therapy assessment using NutriQ and a food log with symptoms, and matching your nutrition and your exercise, kind of collecting all these clues together. Then combine that with metabolic testing, as I'm using PNOE, P-N-O-E, metabolic testing kit. And today I want to go a little bit more into what we're using, what does the test tell us? So we're doing the metabolic test, resting metabolism, and then exercise tests. Bike, treadmill, rower, assault bike we can do with watts. So we're collecting data, measuring, compare against your age group, gender, so norms, and then we're evaluating your information from that test, and then we're analyzing that data so we can identify specific limitations or areas of opportunity that are revealed in a test. What do you need to work on? Similar to our GI map test, or your food sensitivity test. What are we needing to work on? We don't know if we don't test, right? So then we can personalize a coaching program based on the data collected in your fitness test. And we are able to create an exercise program based on your goals coming up, based on the areas of opportunity revealed in the test. And then we can assess and then monitor it between the tests using training peaks. I use Practice Better and Chronometer, and retest maybe 2 months later, and then every quarter, every 3 months, retest. Because those changes, we will have identified changes, improvements, if you did the training schedule, and then you should see improvements, and then we set new goals. So we identify types of testing here. We do structural versus functional. So structural testing, we are working on identifying where you are cardiovascularly, finding your VO2 peak, your respiratory system, measuring your lung capacity, and your muscle metabolism, looking at the ratio of the volume of oxygen to volume of carbon dioxide. And with that, we can find your RER, respiratory exchange ratio. 7 or 0.7 is fat, fuel source, primarily fat. And then we hit a RER of 1.0, and that would be your carbohydrate is your main fuel source. So we can look at this at rest and during exercise to find out your metabolism and fuel source used at different heart rates and create those heart zones that we've been talking about. And then also, if we can combine this with metabolic testing, combine metabolic testing with your blood chemistry panel as measuring your blood, looking at your iron and hemoglobin and different markers on there. And then if you work with the doctor, heart EKG test might be necessary for some people. And then once we've figured out your structural needs and areas of opportunity, those limiters, then we can decide when we are ready to add in functional measurements. So testing a skill you might have done with a coach in sports, acceleration, deacceleration, for example, changing of direction, agility, speed, power, balance. We've been talking about power with Lenita as I've been doing the functional threshold power workouts on a bike once a week to get stronger and faster as a cyclist and a retired triathlete. Maybe I'll do a race, but I just train, swim, bike, run just because I like it. But then we can really figure out where we are and combine all this together. So when we do a metabolic testing, we're doing direct measurement of your heart rate. We put a heart rate strap on you, polar Bluetooth. We're putting a face mask on you where we're measuring the volume of oxygen consumed per minute. So that's going to give us data there. And then the CO2, volume of carbon dioxide expired per minute. So that's in millimeters per minute. We're also measuring your breath. So it's a breath analysis. So the BF is called breathing. The BF is breathing frequency in breaths per minute. And then the VT means the tidal volume or the amount of air you breathe per breath. So that's measured in liters per breath. So tidal volume, the amount of air you breathe per minute. So we can measure that in the test. We're also able to extrapolate the data from the VO2 and the CO2 collected. Will give us information on total calories, the total calories you are burning per minute, so kilocalories a minute, your carbohydrates burned per minute, and your fats burned per minute. We're also able to take the ratio of the volume of oxygen to CO2 is your RER, as I said already. We also can extrapolate and find out what the VE is. Ventilatory is the minute volume or volume of air breathed per minute. So that's extrapolated from the breath frequency, the breathing frequency, times the tidal volume, ventilatory threshold, the liters per minute. And then the VE is volume of carbon dioxide ratio. That's the volume of air breathed per minute per volume of carbon dioxide expired per breath. We can also extrapolate and find the volume of air breathed per minute per volume of oxygen consumed. So that's the VE over the VO2. So super fascinating information, data we can collect. We also can find out the volume of air breathed per minute per volume of carbon dioxide expired per breath, and then also find the volume of air breathed per minute, of course, a volume of oxygen consumed. So it doesn't measure your speed, wattage, or RPM. That would be a different test to do. But this is going to measure, with the face mask on, your ventilatory threshold. And we can look at VT1 and VT2. We're going to identify in the test. What is that? So this is the marker of intensity that can be observed in a person breathing at a point where lactate begins to accumulate in the blood, but we don't think of it as lactate anymore. This is where you get to be more acidosis. And as the intensity of the exercise begins to increase, VT1 can be identified on your charts after we look at the test results. This is where we can see the point where the breathing rate begins to increase. So the intensity at which work commences is your VT1. And then we find your VT2 is more what we know as the anaerobic thresholds. We call it the ventilatory threshold 2. This is when a person's breathing during exercise is the VT2, or known as a second ventilatory threshold. So this is a higher marker of intensity than the VT1. And this is where the person starts to breathe heavily. So a rapid rate of breathing that you're no longer able to speak. So we'll use RPE scale 1 to 10 or 1 through 20. And I ask you each stage of the test, if it's 1 minute increments or 2 minute increments, what your perceived exertion level is, and look at your heart rate. And then we can correlate that with your oxygen, carbon dioxide, and all the other markers I went over. So the exercise duration will decrease due to the intensity level. VT2, again, is the intensity at which hard work commences. We look at how many breaths per minute. So from your test, if it's, say, a bike or treadmill, we can get your VO2 peak, VCO2 peak, and heart rate. We'll look at all this data and then calculate it after, and then we'll give you a report in the next day or so. So it's a really interesting information that you can collect to really work on your performance, but also longevity. You don't have to be an athlete to do this. I think it just gives you more purpose to each workout. You have a weekly routine, a purpose to maybe the next month or 2-3 months to figure out, okay, this is what I need to improve. And then combine the fitness test with the resting metabolic test. Ideally, you need to do both together, not just one, but to get the full picture. And you could walk on the treadmill with incline. We don't have to be a runner to do the test, or you can do a bike. So getting this information, retesting, and then we can measure changes in the structure or system versus your performance, and really look at how individualized we can do this. So instead of using math, calculating everything, we're collecting data, so science-based. Now, when I get the results back for the athletes or people just training to figure out how to train and have purpose to the workouts, as I said, we look at the different heart rate zones. So as I went over a previous podcast about zoning, that we want to look at these different zones as a cyclist or runner or just training for health, longevity, as I said. What are your 5 zones? And looking at how we can improve the structural type of training program, and then when to add in the functional training. So we want to look at cardiac strength, increase respiratory volume, mitochondrial density, increase your capillarization, and muscle hypertrophy. So we break this up: delivery, utilization, and resistance. So we want to improve that. And then we have functional training. That's when we can add in, when appropriate, after we have improved the structural limitations we have identified, or if you don't have any, then we can add these in. Intervals, they're going to be used to improve speed, coordination, modality, specific strength, as hill climbing on a bike or running hills if you're doing a hilly race coming up, or trail running. And then when you should add in resistance training, probably now. Most people don't do enough of the right type of strength training, or even consistently improving your maximum strength, power, or if you want to work on strength endurance. So we can figure out based on your goals, training schedule in the past few months and what you have coming up for goals in the next 6 months or year, and look at how you should be training. So we find your zones. Look at zone 1. Zone 1 is based on what we call your adjusted fat max. That's going to be your top end of your zone 1. Your bottom of zone 1 is 10 to 15 beats below that. So adjusted fat max represents intensity that stimulates the highest fat utilization with the lowest carbohydrate use. So this is used to identify which intensity is your zone 1, which is designed to promote recovery. So we're in zone 1 when we do interval training, and we'll go over that today or a future episode, because I think a lot of people do not do interval training correctly, which means zone 4 or zone 5, come all the way back down to zone 1 and staying there appropriate time in each zone. Now, zone 2 is the next zone, and that's where we call that long continuous distance, where we do a lot of aerobic training. So this is created figuring out your heart zones based on your metabolic test. The bottom end of zone 2 is that adjusted fat max I just went over, which is the top of zone 1. And then we have the metabolic crossover point I've spoken about over the years, where the carbohydrate increases and the fat goes down. It's called the metabolic crossover points, where the fat drops, carbs go up. This represents a zone where aerobic glycolysis is the main fuel source right before carb utilization exceeds fat utilization, marking the switch to anaerobic glycolysis. So we determine your true, at this moment in time, zone 2, and this will change based on the training program. That's why we want to retest every 2 to 3 months so we can reset your zones. And then we have zone 3. This is going to be more your tempo, pace. Zone 3 is the bottom of zone 3 will be your fat carbohydrate crossover point that we just said is the top of zone 2. And then the top of zone 3 will be that VT2 I went over, ventilatory threshold 2. And we'll figure out that VT2 minus 10 beats, and that's what will be our zone 3 top end. We can look at your breathing frequency, and that's where we want to identify where that VT2 is, where we move from 20 to 30 breaths per minute and see a rise in your breathing. So zone 2, we can put these together looking at the breathing frequency, which is interesting. It is driven up by chemoreceptors responding to the increase in carbon dioxide production and the changes in our pH level as we get more acidosis that initiates in zone 3 is secondary to the fuel system in use. So that is where zone 3, we're more anaerobic glycolysis fuel source. Zone 1 is more of the free fatty acids. Zone 2, we're more aerobic glycolysis, and then we're getting more anaerobic glycolysis, because remember, the bottom of zone 3 is that metabolic crossover point where carb usage goes up and fat goes down, but you're not 100% carbs, you're just burning less fat, more carbs. So good to know these numbers, because you can figure out how you should best train, and then I'll go over in a bit how we figure out your training program based on these zones. So zone 4, again, is going to be the VT2 minus 10 beats is the bottom of zone 4, and that's correlated with the increase of your breathing frequency identified in the test from going 30 to 40 breaths per minute, and we start to see another increase and the second drive increasing that breathing frequency. So breathing frequency, as I said, is driven up by the chemoreceptors responding in the increase in carbon dioxide and pH changes that initiate zone 4 secondary to the fuel system in use. So now zone 4 fuel system is more lactate phosphorylation. So we're using lactate, and we're going to have increase in breathing frequencies to help exhale more, that carbon dioxide production, to help balance our pH as we get more acidosis. So we exhale more so that breathing frequency will increase. Then our last zone in our measurements is zone 5. So the bottom of zone 5 is where the start of the second breathing frequency drive changes, and the top end is going to be that maximum heart rate we get to. So this is why you want to be rested before you do this test, so we can really identify your true zone. So zone 5, again, is the start of the second breath frequency drive. So now we're seeing 40 breaths per minute up to your maximum heart rate. And I'll ask you before the test, what is the highest heart rate you have seen in training or racing? What have you seen? So breathing frequency, again, is driven up by the chemoreceptors now responding to the increase in carbon dioxide production and the changes in your pH that initiates zone 5, secondary to the major fuel system in use. So now our major fuel system is in zone 5, the ATP, PC, or CRP production or fuel source. So we want to look at the phosphocreatine fuel source. This is why we need zone 5 training to be truly zone 5. You have to go all the way back down to zone 1 to refuel that ATP PC fuel system so you can go hard again. Now, if your max heart rate is not identified during the test, if we're testing correctly and you're rested and you're ready to go and you're comfortable wearing the mask and going to that hard pain cave, if we can't get there, we can just use what you have found before, maybe in a 5K race. So then, what do we do with all this information? This is where I think it's really important to test. So we're using science, not math, to identify the zones. Ideally, you can find someone that does metabolic testing near you, or come out to North San Diego for a nice few days and do testing with me in person. And trying to create a relationship with our Carmel Valley club I go to do testing there. But then we can use these metrics to identify your zones and then reestablish what they might be over time after we've created that personalized program for you and that you retest so we can update those results. Now, what I find is important to go over is looking at the data we collect, your VO2 peak, your VO2 pulse, your heart rate. That's going to be measuring your cardiovascular system. Then we're measuring your respiratory system with that ventilatory threshold, the highest value throughout the test. We're looking at your VT by zone, your BF by zone, so ventilatory threshold, and your breath frequency by zone. And then your VO2 ratio to breathing frequency, your BF. And then we're also looking at metabolic system by measuring your carb to fat crossover point and your fat burning efficiency. So we get all this information. We can identify your high end of your zones. Zone 3, zone 4 is going to be that VT2 section. Zones 4 and zone 5 will be based on the breathing frequency as we went over. And VE will identify 2 in the zone 4 and zone 5. So good information. Remember that VE is a minute ventilation. This is the volume of air exhaled in 1 minute. But we don't want to look at that by itself. We want to look at all these three metrics together to really get the idea. Breathing frequency, the number of breaths completed in 1 minute. Again, the tidal volume is the volume of air exhaled in one breath. What is that amount? So we can get all this from the test. So cool. And then we do a recovery. So when I do your test, we do a warm up for 3 minutes. Well, before that, we do a parameter test that will figure out your zones, predicted zones, before we put the mask on, just going by heart rate and RPE. And then the actual test is 3 minutes. And then the main set is 9 to 12 minutes based on how long you go. Ideally, if we fix the right test protocol for you, we end by 12 minutes. So it's not too long that you'll get too tired. And then we measure a recovery 2 minutes or so. Not doing anything, you just jump on the side rails or stop pedaling. Recovery. The first minute is going to measure how fast does your heart rate drop in that first minute. And then after 2 minutes, we're measuring how much you drop in your carbon dioxide. So we measure cardiovascular system with the heart rate first minute. And then in the 2 minutes, we're measuring your systemic recovery. So we'll get information on that. And this really cool report, I must say, got kind of why I wanted to do this with my clients. So then we'll review your results, create a program for you, looking at your intensity zones and figure out how to train if you are, looking at what you're trying to work on based on your goals, and then ideally look at your nutrition and everything else too. So with this information, what I think is super fun to do with clients, again, testing and not guessing, is that how to train, how to exercise. So when we do your test, once we get the report back, we can identify your needs. Where are your limiters? Where are your areas of opportunity? So if we find out, hey, you need more cardio training, your rest metabolism rate's not great, you have bad fat burning efficiency, your metabolic efficiency isn't optimal. So maybe we see you have low fat burning volume, you cross over, that metabolic crossover point is lower than it should be. You have an early activation of carbohydrate uses as fuel. And this happens. It's not good or bad. It just identifies what you need to work on, how we should train differently. So we're going to improve your metabolic fitness and improve your mitochondrial density and capillarization by training a little bit more and probably more cardio. Maybe you're not doing cardio, but maybe you're doing more CrossFit, or you're doing more focus on HIIT training and training too much in zone 3, and you're working on the wrong zone. So we might identify you need more zone 2, and then maybe add in some zone 5 when appropriate. Other tests, we might reveal that you need to do more interval training. Maybe you're doing only zone 2 and you should improve some other areas. We might find in the results that your aerobic health, cardiovascular fitness, and high intensity and performance level scores could be better. So we might do with this client, we would add in that zone 5 when appropriate. So maybe zone 4, and then build up to zone 5 intervals with a zone 2 recovery days. So we want to improve metabolic efficiency and fat burning efficiency, and work on figuring out what's best for them, right? So if you need more interval training or you need more zone 2 training, we can figure out that. Maybe you're doing too much zone 4 or 5 intervals. So we can figure out, hey, they need to do more interval training. You're not doing anything. You're doing too much just long chronic cardio. Your training intervals might be not intervals. So a lot of people do spin class and they're not truly doing zone 5 to zone 1 workout. So we might need a little bit more variability in the workout program, and really looking at, hey, I thought I was doing intervals, but I'm not going hard enough. Like, I'm finding that for myself. I'm not going 160, 170 and holding that heart rate for 30 seconds for my zone 5. Because to do true intervals, I want to get to today, you want to be training up at that zone 5. Once you reach that number, you want to stay there for 30 seconds. Then you want to get to your zone 1 recovery zone, and truly get down in that number. So it's not just hitting that number and going back up, but staying down in that recovery zone for the right duration. So we want to figure that out, because I think a lot of people do interval training wrong. And I would love to figure out with clients, put a heart rate monitor on them. It's hard to figure out your zone 5 heart rate wise, because it takes longer to pick up if you're there or not. But looking at, here's my target number for my zone 5, then come back down. So when we do the testing, we're using the zone table that we'll get from your test and put it in this nice report that you will get and go over with me if I'm your coach, and look at the results, figure out where your recovery is. Recovery zone 1, it's all the way down there. So if you're truly doing zoned training, interval training, we want to look at your zones and do interval training correctly. because I think a lot of people are just doing, say, probably zone 3. They're not really going all out because it's hard. It's my area of opportunity too. So we'll figure out what amount of intervals you should do, your cardio, and your resistance training, so we can figure out what is best for you based on where you are now. Now, what's really great that Daniel Crumback, who created this course I'm going over to be metabolic expert coach, we have this chart that Daniel put together, training recommendations. So if we identify you need more interval training, you've already been doing cardio training a lot, like most of us endurance athletes, we just need to maintain metabolic fitness if we don't have a race coming up. So say a minimum cardiovascular zone 2 workout, you're doing them 1 time a week. If you're trying to improve your metabolic fitness, maybe you're doing zone 2 to 3 times a week, with some workouts finishing in zone 5 when you're able to. So the frequency of these zone 2 workouts vary depending on your time, if you're training for any events, and if you have any other limitations that we need to focus on more so, prioritize. Now, interval training, some people do this too much, some people don't do enough, and then there's people that don't do it right. So we want to look at what type of intervals are best for you based on where you are right now. So we select the best benefits based on their test results, your limitations. So as I said, zone 1's for recovery. If we need cardiovascular improvement, so we identified you had some cardiovascular limitations on your test, we may prescribe more time each week in zone 3 and zone 5. If you have identified metabolic limitations, you need more high intensity intervals, as I do, we need more intervals in zone 4 and or zone 5. Remember, when you do that, you have to come all the way down to zone 1. So we'll go over that next. And then if we have identified your VO2 pulse or your VO2 to breath frequency trend lines decrease, then we'll figure out which zones we need for that workout. So your VO2 pulse, by the way, is, your O2 pulse, ratio of oxygen volume consumed over heart rate. And so we can look up, what else did I say? Really important to know what those are. The VO2 breath frequency. So if the volume of oxygen ratio to your breathing frequency trend is going down, that's where we might want to do more intervals. So zone 5 is where we want to spend time, twice a week or so. Not too much, more is not better. If you have any metabolic limitations. So low intensity with zone 2 cardio is beneficial to do a combination of zone 5, because we'll go over the benefits of zone 5 and zone 2 are important. So zone specific respiratory capability limitations, those are going to be different, working on your breath work. So good respiratory program if you have some areas of opportunity in how you are breathing. So maybe you hyperventilate when you are at rest and exercising. So maybe we need to do some more breath work protocols and using a timer, metronome to figure out your breathing. So I want to get to this. I think this is really fun. If you are doing intervals to stress the system, there's different ways to do them. Timing, distance, on a track, on a bike, going by wattage, going by speed. Typical workout we do in track, 400 meter repeats, right? And then you do 100 meter recovery. Now I did track, San Diego Track Club. I've been trying to go, but I don't like Tuesday night track workout, but that's when it is. So I barely go, honestly. Ideally, I'd go if it was in the morning. So 400 meter repeats, they were doing 400 meter easy jog in between. And I was frustrated because people were not probably truly going up to their zone 4 or 5 workout because they were not coming down to zone 1 on the recovery, because people are still running. They're jogging slowly, but there's no way you can get your heart rate all the way down before you go hard again for the next 400. So say you're doing 8 to 10 400 meter repeats. What's interesting, Daniel Crumback teaches us that the first 3 sets, he may never reach the intensity required, and recovery is excessive. The next 3 sets, the work intensity and recovery may be correct, But then the last 4 sets, recovery may be too short, impacting your ability to work hard. So I always kind of look at intervals. I need to warm up a long time, as in our FTP spike class on Wednesdays. It takes me a long time to warm up. So I should ideally go earlier and start for 20 minutes at my 120, 130 heart rate. I think track workouts too, it takes a while to go hard. So I've been doing them on a treadmill at the end of a workout. Now, the time, it's hard to do this in a group because everyone's going to recover probably differently. So if I come all the way down to my zone 1, it might take me different duration to come to zone 1 before I start my next 400 meter repeat or zone 5 sprint, because I need to listen to when I'm ready to go versus just everyone goes as a group. So going in a group, but going by your own heart rate might be ideal, if not chaotic with a group on a track. So the goal is not to achieve effective workout 30% of the time. The goal is to hit those numbers and then I know when I am doing repeats and I need to do these each week when I'm fully rested, that I know when to stop. When your numbers, you get slower at the end, right? So that's telling your body's telling you, I'm done. I can't do any more with good form. And my muscles, body's getting fatigued. So that's when you should stop. If you're trying to do 10 and it's the 7th one and you're getting slower, not faster, that's when to cut it down. So anyways, the training recommendations. Here's this great chart I use with clients. Again, you want to warm up for sure before you start these. And even Daniel talks about getting warmed up into top of your zone 4 before you start doing these sprints. Duration of the work phase is longer at the beginning and shorter each set. Duration of the recovery phase is shorter at the beginning and longer each set, because remember, as I just said, you're going by how fast your heart rate comes down and how fast you can go up. So once you're warmed up, you might not take as long. In the beginning of the workout, it takes forever to get all the way back up to 160. So completing intervals correctly is essential for gaining the benefits of each interval type. Daniel talks about the importance of impacting the system that you're trying to do. The work and recovery phase begins when you have reached the zone indicated in the table that we'll review here. Short interval work begins only when you reach zone 5 and does not include the time it takes to reach that zone. So if zone 5, looking here, is 10 to 30 seconds all out effort. So RPE on a scale 1 to 10, you're at a 10. The recovery duration is 20 to 60 seconds. So the work to rest ratio is 1 to 2. So 30-second sprint means 60-second recovery, or however long it takes to get to zone 1. So when I'm starting, I might not be fully warmed up. It's going to take me longer to get to, say, my 160 heart rate. But once I hit 160 heart rate, I need to stay there for the 30 seconds. So it's hard to tell exactly how long I'm there because the delay in pickup time of your heart rate monitor. And if you're not wearing the chest strap, you're not going to get as accurate, I think, as if you're just wearing the watch, measuring your pulse. So wear a heart rate strap. And your recovery phase begins only when you reach zone 1. So once I hit, say, 110 heart rate, then I stay there for the 30 seconds or 60 seconds. So really important to know, once you get that 160 heart rate, for example, stay there for 20 or 10 to 30 seconds and then come down. So that's why he says initially the workouts will be longer, as getting to zone 5 will take longer, and then all the way back to zone 1 will take longer. So you want to monitor how long it takes to you, or analyze your report on Training Peaks afterwards, so you can look at your Garmin, sync it to your Training Peaks, and it will be able to show us what's going on. So if you are doing a medium length sprint, that would be zone 4. That is a 30 to 90 second interval. RPE is 8 to 9. Your recovery is always going to be down to zone 1 when you're doing sprints. On a zone 4 intervals, the ratio of work to rest is 1 to 1. If you are doing longer tempo, which I was doing this morning after a long warm up, I did 10-minute pieces. So long zone 3 to zone 4 workout, 5 to 10 minutes. And then the ratio work to rest is 2-to-1. So if I'm doing 10 minutes, as I did this morning, twice, I did 3 times, 2.5 times. I did 10 minutes, and then the last I only had 5 minutes left on the beach to run fast. The recovery is 2.5 minutes to 5 minutes. So if I go 10 minutes, I need 5 minutes easy in between. Back down to zone 1. And then if I'm doing tempo, I guess this is more what I was doing today, zone 3, 10 to 20 minutes. So that's if I'm training for half marathon, I would always do tempo pieces closer up to the race. That is an RPE of 6 to 7. And the recovery duration is 4 to 8 minutes. So this is a 2.5 work ratio to 1. So the recovery isn't as long. So say I'm doing 20-minute piece, 2x20, trying to hold my race pace for half marathon, that zone 3 heart rate, and the recovery in between those 2x20s are going to be 4 to 8 minutes back down into zone 1. So maybe it's a slow jog with a walk. Okay, so that's the difference. Now, zone 2 is your cardio where you're there 40 minutes or more. So say you're doing your long run or you're doing just a recovery run because you don't want to do a hard workout and then do hard the next day. So we need hard, easy, hard days. So you want to alternate, make sure you're not doing back-to-back interval days. Now, 40 minutes or more, zone 2, perceived exertion here is a 4 to 5. And you don't have recovery. So maybe your workout, again, less is more minimal effective dose too, is at 45 minutes to 60 minutes max. So, just not necessarily running. Biking takes a little longer. Maybe you need an hour and a half bike ride, zone 2. So that was what I wanted to share. Again, this is all from Daniel Crumback in the Metabolic Expert Training course that they used to have in Pinoy. Sadly, they don't use this course anymore. So I've been quite upset and complaining, honestly, a lot, because I have this because I was signing up for Pinoy a year ago and then just decided I was ready for it this year. But they stopped educating the people that buy it because they want you to work with their metabolic expert and not train you. They want to have us just do the testing and then use their people to analyze the data, which that's what I love doing. So work with them and get my reports, but I still want to do the coaching to my own clients and create their programs. So I have access to Daniel Crumback's information, and we will be talking to him soon, talking about the zones and proper training, personalized coaching programs, and proper recovery, and working on structure over functional and all the respiratory training that's so important to learn how to breathe right before you do this stuff, as well as gaining that strength and when it's good to go to zone 5. So remember, everyone's different. We're not going to get a one size fits all approach. Everyone's going to be different sets, duration, different starting point. So meeting you where you are at is really important for a coach to work with an athlete. And that's what I do. And identifying your starting point, starting with the shortest duration on your intervals is best. Again, less is more. So example, Daniel says, if you're completing medium intervals, 6 to 8 sets of 30 to 90 seconds, you would start the shortest duration, 30 seconds. So don't say, 30 to 90 seconds, I'm going to do 90 because more is better. That's wrong. So you want to do less is more, minimal effective dose. Don't try to do the high end range. Start less and build up. Now, if you're able to do all 8 sets, for example, above says 6 to 8 sets of 30 to 90 seconds, you started doing 60 and you've been doing these once a week, and then you're able to do 8 sets at 30 seconds and you could do one more. Well, then we work towards doing a 45-second interval and work on that for another month. So we want to figure out when you can do a little bit more or when it's best to do less. So that's where you work with a coach and tweak and adjust your schedule each week based on the results and the recovery and repair between workouts, and testing again every 2 to 3 months on your metabolic test. So you continue at the duration until you can achieve 8 effective sets, 2 workouts in a row, and then increase it to 60 seconds and then start again. So this allows you to work with your coach to adjust your training load and match your abilities and improvements. I love that. So we are identifying your training requirements, giving you purpose to your workouts, giving you goals to work on so you can achieve them when we look at your next test, and you'll see yourself improve. I think just running the same program over and over again, same with your same strength training program, same with your nutrition, your fasting, and everything, as I say, is the Goldilocks effect. And doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is, of course, insanity. So if you are struggling getting results, doing all the air quotes right things, you're not getting anywhere. Well, you're trying to do what everyone else is doing, not doing what you need to do. So you need to figure out with the coach, with me, we'll figure out what your body needs to do. Look at your external stressors, look at your hidden internal sources of chronic stress that are impacting your hormone balance, your immune system, your digestion, your detoxification, your immune system, and your nervous system, and figure out the best program for you. So this is a very holistic approach and really diving in, but at least get a fitness test gives you more information on how to train, but the rest of it we still need to work on too. So just, it's not the be all end all doing your metabolic testing. You still need to work on the other elements of what I call the holistic method. Remember, the 8 elements of the holistic method are nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, movement, mobility, digestion, gut health, hydration, mineral balancing. Then the 8th one is gratitude, happiness, play, laughter. So that balancing your nervous system. So we want to get this information from your test, get a fitness report, do the resting metabolic test, and then ideally put this all with functional lab testing, create that program, matching your nutrition with your fueling, figuring out how to fuel or not before workouts, but really fueling during longer workouts when you're going a little longer, how to do that. And then that post-workout, getting the right protein in and nature's carbs if you're more anaerobic, when to fit in those essential aminos and creatine and MCT and even the ketone IQ. And really looking at combining zone 2 and zone 5 intervals to improve your muscle metabolism, your cellular health. I'm working on this myself as an aging athlete. I think this is a great idea for a lot of us if you've been training a long time and not getting results, as I feel like I don't have the extra gear, I don't have power, I don't have the leg strength, and I'm not training hard enough. So instead of doing that black hole training zone 3, it's going low and then going high. Intervals require work phase at a certain intensity, Daniel says, and the duration followed by appropriate recovery phase at a certain intensity duration repeated multiple times. That is interval training. I think a Tabata is great. I know from being a fitness studio owner and being in the industry, it got to be everything was Tabata, and people are doing intervals, not doing intervals. So they're just doing fast, slow, but they're not getting the heart rate high enough to create that effective dose. So you want to get the right intensity, the right duration to work on, and the right recovery phase, that zone 1, in order to affect the limited system that we identify in the test here for you, using the appropriate heart rate interval method needed based on the test, unless you don't have any systemic limitations. So then we do more functional intervals using watts, speed, hills that we go into after their tests. So everyone's going to be different, remember. So don't do the same duration intervals. Your recovery time is going to be different than someone else. So figure what is best for you. Test and not guess, as I always say. And let me know how I can help you. If you want to come out here to San Diego or find someone that's near you to do your testing. And then the rest of it's all virtual. I can meet with anyone around the world to do the functional lab testing, assessment, investigation, and coaching calls. Just the metabolic testing is a little more hands-on. So I can't do that on a Zoom call. But let me know if you have questions. Head to debbiepotts.net to get all the information you need and follow up with me a discovery call to learn more if you want to work together. So enjoy the day and figure out what you're doing now on your training schedule. And if you're struggling getting results by doing the same thing over and over again, well, let's stop, pause, push reset, and reboot your system. All right? Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.